Yeah, I remember the day she came and told me, she said, "Daddy, I'm gonna get an apartment." She was 19 years old. And she was showing me on her computer that they had already seen the apartment they're gonna get. And I'm like, oh no, I really didn't want her to, but she was 19 years old.
The process wasn't too hard because we were limited by our income, by the amount of money that we were starting with. So that narrowed it down. If we were going to make the jump, we wanted it to be somewhere fun and, well suited for us.
She had it all planned, how they're going to pay bills, and they were all working at the time, her roommates, and she did it for a whole year.
It was really cool for us, especially for our first apartment and first time leaving our parents' homes, to have a 2-bedroom, 2-story townhouse with the patio connected to our bedroom.
The first night we moved in, no furniture, nothing in our name, but we got our sleeping bags and some snacks and stayed the night on the floor. It was a very exciting moment for us. I felt safe. I think the rest of us felt overall relatively safe.
Do you think you're going to ever find out what happened and who did this?
As more and more time goes by, it's hard to be hopeful. I did not ever think that she would be found dead.
It's just overwhelming, the thoughts that go through your head, like why?
How do you describe her relationship with Rick?
He was definitely very much a responsible father figure, but he was always there for her. I mean, she could call him at 3 in the morning and he'd pick her up wherever she was.
He's a very burly man, but I think looks can be deceiving, especially in his case. He was a very doting father. Adrienne was definitely a father's girl.
Yeah, I was a single dad. Their mom was still in the picture. They'd go and visit her as well. Yeah, it was very important to have the kids there in a place where they were happy. I'd rather have them home than out in the streets.
Her house was like the house to hang out at. She had the pool, she had the pool table, she had the snacks.
We had a swimming pool in the back, so yeah, we'd have all the kids over, and they'd spend a lot of time there. I really enjoyed those years. I do remember when she was a child, though, she told me, Daddy, I don't want to grow up. I don't want to be an adult. And I said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. You got to grow up. She said she wants you to stay little. I always knew that she was going to be like an overachiever or want to go to school and want to learn a lot. She wanted to be a journalist. She loved books.
She was definitely very like reserved in her own way. Had this almost like intimidating intelligence about her, for sure. If it wasn't for her like almost meek demeanor, I think she would kind of terrify everybody in the room.
She was shy to begin with, but she built this circle of friends, this group around her at all times, and that's where she was really herself.
What do you miss the most about Adrienne?
She was honestly more like a sister. We really were inseparable.
Why was it important for you to talk to us for this project?
It's the only thing we have left to keep it being swept under the rug and becoming a cold case file. You know what I mean? Like something that you hear about 30 years later and like, wow, they never solved that. Like I don't want that to be this.
Honestly, I had kind of given up hope, you know, like initially I did a lot of interviews. I went to a lot of news stations and a lot, you know, when she was missing and when she was found, and nothing would ever come out of it. When something like this happens, it's taking a life, but it's also affecting the whole life of all the family around, you know, that never gonna be the same. My son is never gonna be the same. I was his only sister, you know, and they were very close.
Adrienne Salinas left her apartment at 4:30 in the morning on June 15, 2013. We assume she went this direction because she called a cab and told the driver to meet her at a gas station down this street.
She was overly intoxicated, so she was vulnerable.
Surveillance video from the gas station shows she never made it there.
There were people out, but nothing happened that caught anybody's attention or that they cared to involve themselves with.
Over the next days and weeks, family, friends, and police searched this area for clues. It was only about 5 blocks, but Adrienne had simply vanished.
We did a major canvass of the whole neighborhood.
There were the search dogs. There was the media outside of her door.
We wanted to have hope. We wanted to be optimistic about it, but there's also a sense of realism there.
2 months later, somebody found human remains in this wash in Apache Junction, about 30 miles east of Tempe. It was Adrienne. Since then, detectives have followed dozens of leads, but they have not found the killer.
And what's the likelihood of you guys picking them up? Today? Today? Okay. Like in the next, what? Can you pass my name and number on to him and have him give me a call? This is Adrienne's case file right here. these are 5, 6, 10, 11 binders right there. Typically it's 1 to 2 or 3, so yeah, that's a lot.
You're really looking at a lot of information, a lot of different people, and trying to rule out as much as you can. That's why we created a timeline to go through when people were coming and going, at least per what they said and what data we could look at. Then looking at each individual is how they related to her, related to each other.
So how do you solve a case when there is zero physical evidence?
Hopefully some tips come in. You know, like recently I've been working a tip that came in. I went down to the Cochise County Jail and interviewed a guy. So this is the Cochise County detention facility. Late last week I got some information that there's a male subject that's an inmate here currently. The information I received was that he may have information on Adrienne's death. So that's why I'm here today to interview him. He doesn't know that we're coming. I don't know how he is with law enforcement, whether he is law enforcement friendly and will talk to me. So we'll see what happens. If it's not true and it was made up because some mental health issues or drug issues, then of course, that'll be disappointing. Well, I interviewed him and he was willing to talk, and we talked about a lot of stuff. Just the information that I was hoping to get from him, I didn't. I still think the information that we've received recently is worth following up on. We owe it to Adrienne. Ultimately, that's who we owe this to. Nobody else matters. Her family, yes, some closure, but we owe it to Adrienne to give her some peace.
The morning Adrienne disappeared, her cell phone sent a final signal to a cell tower near her apartment in Tempe. Her cell never connected to a tower in Apache Junction, where her remains were found. But there is someone else's cell that may have sent a signal at both locations. That is, her killer. Did you ever try to figure out if somebody's cell phone was pinging here in Tempe and then pinged again out there near the scene?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Were you ever able to find anybody that matched those locations?
Yes. Yeah, we have a large group of people that match those locations.
Do any of them seem like they could be the person?
To date, no. Like most of the ones that we were able to talk to, we're more or less able to move past a lot of those people versus saying, oh, this one looks really good, we need to, or they may be capable of something like this.
Have they all been ruled out at this point?
Yes. Now there's a challenge to that, and that is, I'm going to say it, T-Mobile never responded to our legal request. So that's a whole cell phone provider that we don't have the information for.
That company didn't turn over the records.
Yes.
The killer might have been a T-Mobile customer.
Yeah.
Did they ever explain? I mean, did they just not do it?
They just didn't do it. We had a court order warrant for it, so there was a judge that said, "Hey, I'm ordering you to do this," but there's a limitation to our reach to some of these companies. Maybe me asking to see one supervisor after the next and maybe offended somebody. I don't have the answer because it's the only time in my career as a detective that I've had any company not give us something based on a warrant.
We've been looking at this case for a year, walking down this street asking the question, who killed Adrienne Salinas? One name keeps coming back to mind, Brian Miller, the zombie hunter. We know he was in this neighborhood the morning Adrienne disappeared. One of his friends said that he was spiraling at the time. And let's face it, he is an accused serial killer. But there are some differences between Adrienne's case and the attacks and murders that Miller is accused of. We know he was at least in Tempe the day that Adrienne disappeared. People who've been watching the show probably now think that's gotta be the guy. There's just too many coincidences. As the case detective, do you think it was Miller?
We haven't ruled anybody out, but there's evidence and information in this case that just don't go along with his MO, the way he did things. The evidence they found in some of those other cases, some of the physical evidence they found in those other cases, it just isn't there. And I mean, could he have changed things up? Yeah, but he's got a pattern of how things he did, and evidence they were able to collect because of the way he did things, and we just don't have some of that. We don't have that.
In the cases where we know he was the attacker, he used a knife. In the cases where he's accused of being the attacker, he used a knife in a particular way. Was there anything on Adrienne's remains that indicate that somebody used a knife in a similar pattern?
No, there's no indications of that.
So that would be a big one that says to you, this might not be the guy.
Correct.
Is it possible that there's a knife wound somewhere that there's just no evidence of because that part of the remains were not complete?
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. Of course, it depends on where somebody receives a knife wound, whether it's going to leave additional evidence that might still be there. Nicks on bones and those kinds of things, and we don't have anything like that.
His cell phone data was analyzed. Did any of that connect him to that spot in Tempe at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and then again in Apache Junction shortly thereafter?
No.
His Social media presence was also analyzed and looked at. Did anything in his social media say that he was there at 4:35 in the morning or again in Apache Junction shortly thereafter?
No. And those are kind of things I'm talking about. You know, he had his way of doing things that those kinds of things are probably evidence in his other cases because of just the way he operated. But none of those come into play at pointing the finger at him in this particular case.
Was there anything that was collected with Adrienne Salinas' remains that might contain DNA from the killer?
You know, there's certain things in an investigation we don't pass on, and that's one of those.
So there might be something.
That's one of those
there.
things I'm not prepared to answer.
Okay.
I really would like this to be resolved, for us to find whoever did this, but it's just hard to be positive, optimistic about this because so much time has passed already.
Do you think somebody out there knows something?
Yeah, I mean, there's gotta be. Unless the person or persons involved are somehow no longer with us, you know, I don't see how nobody knows anything.
I know it's been a long time, but anything's possible. I mean, that's why I'm doing it. As hard as it is, possibly tug at somebody's heartstrings out there, possibly somebody's covering up for somebody, doesn't want to say something, you know, and to realize the severity of it, the damage that this person done and is capable of doing. It's gotta end, it's gotta be stopped.
When a case goes cold or goes forgotten, people forget and people move on and things happen. And as a homicide detective, you need to not be part of that I forgot or it's okay because nobody else cares. You need that drive, you need that passion. And for somebody to show that, that's what you want.
I'm going to solve the case. I hope I can do it soon. But it's going to get solved. So whoever did this, your time's limited.